Hi, welcome to Chard Review. After getting lost from his parents in space, little Willie ends up landing on an unknown planet where he must fight totally bizarre creatures in order to survive, relying only on the help of a simple survival robot. Today we will recap the story of the movie Astro Kid from 2019. Somewhere in space, William spends his days on a spaceship with his parents, who are space explorers. Every day when he wakes up, the young man counts with the help of robots to do his chores and then goes to the aircraft corridor where some holograms are programmed to set up the scenario of a game about to defeat the boss of Stage 45. Willie shoots with his bow at full power, but the arrow cannot penetrate the pixels of the boss, who strikes back with an energy ball to end the game. The boy decides to appeal and starts charging his electric power. But just when his special was almost complete, his mother cuts the monster in half with her sword, passing the phase and ending the game. Annoyed, William asks why she did this, and the woman replies that he is late for breakfast, but instead of going to eat, the young man decides to follow his mother to the laboratory and ends up touching a place he shouldn't have, having his arm swallowed by a buggy plant that makes hair come out of every part of his body. Luckily for Willie, his mother is already making the antidote and soon manages to get him back to normal, asking the boy to go to the kitchen and give the other dose to his mother, who has also been infected. After returning to normal, the very excited man says that he is going to the depot and asks his son to come to as soon as he finishes eating. After the meal, Willie meets with his father and asks him to catalog the creatures, but the man says that he is not yet an explorer and asks him to just take pictures of the rock samples they have collected about to take them back to Earth. Willie's father leaves the boy in charge of cataloging everything and goes to the cockpit to pilot the ship. However, as soon as the man leaves, the young man immediately gives up working with the samples and returns to the corridor to continue his game. Suddenly, the spaceship passes through an asteroid belt, and William's mother must activate the force field to avoid damage from the collisions. Still, the vehicle starts rocking from side to side, causing the boy to fall into one of the rooms. Will's father leaves his wife in charge of controlling the ship while he goes to get his son from the depot, but since the boy is not there, the man returns to his seat and starts checking the security cameras in every room for his son. As soon as they find the boy, his parents ask him to run to the control room as fast as possible, but at that very moment, a gigantic asteroid manages to pass through the force field and slams into the spacecraft, activating the security protocol and locking all the doors with no other means of protection. William's father asks him to enter the escape module and await his orders, but one of the asteroids ends up taking the balance off the boy, who is leaning heavily on the button that activates the ejection sequence, drifting in space. Willie just watches as the ship explodes into 1,000 pieces just as his parents also eject in another module. Worried, the couple starts a video call with their son, asking him to take care of himself and that soon they will rescue him. But the ships end up drifting apart and losing the signal, leaving Will alone to watch his parents go away. After wandering for some time, Willie finally approaches the orbit of a planet and begins to be attracted by the gravitational field plummeting through the atmosphere until he lands gently in the middle of a red sand desert. As soon as the ship lands, a robot appears from the ground and introduces itself as Buck, a survival module for unknown planets to ensure Willie safety. The robot goes out and starts checking the surrounding conditions to make sure it is safe, as well as getting the transmitter from the escape module. According to Buck, this transmitter is responsible for sending a distress signal to probes passing nearby, but there is no way of knowing when one of the satellites will pass by, and it is the duty of the survival module to keep Will safe until it does. To help, Buck surveys everything on the ship and starts calculating how long the supplies will last, but soon realizes that William is upset and decides to entertain him with an exploration kit consisting of a camera and a weapon that works as a kind of futuristic Swiss Army knife full of trinkets like a grappling hook, a knife, and an overpowered blowtorch. Willie activates the laser function and starts pointing at the ground around Buck, who is bugged by all the spinning. After having fun with the robot, the boy goes back to the exploration kit and grabs the camera to catalog his finds around the planet. But since the only thing in this desert are some rock crystals, he has nothing to photograph but pebbles. Suddenly, the earth begins to shake and they discover that the crystals are actually giant crabs made entirely of stone. Afraid of those things, the two start running and hide behind one of them, from where Buck stretches out his claw to retrieve the transmitter and his backup battery. But as soon as they get the objects, the crystal they are standing on also starts moving, revealing it to be another one of the crabs that starts chasing them. Knowing that they will be reached in a few seconds, Buck decides to change shape and transforms into a bike to be able to distance himself from the creatures. But during the escape, Willie ends up dropping the robot's backup battery, leaving them with only the current. Large with no way back to recover, Buck continues at full power towards a cave until one of the crabs throws a rock from its tail, sending the pair flying through the air and forcing the robot to use its grappling hook to save the boy, preventing him from crashing to the ground. As they approach the cave, Buck realizes that they will not fit and asks Willie to duck at the last second, thus making it through the tunnel safe and sound. With no way back to the desert, the two decide to continue following the cave while Buck puts the transmitter on his back, using his own energy to send the stress signal into space on the other side of the tunnel. The two survivors see a large forest and decide to go there to retrieve the supplies they lost in the desert as well as to set up camp where they will stay until the probe passes through the planet's orbit. With the end of the first night, Buck still has 72% of his battery left, but still has a long way to go and many things to do. As dawn breaks, Willie tries to take pictures of some creatures for his catalog, but Buck chases away everything that comes near with the excuse of protecting the boy, preventing him from collecting his samples. Needing to travel a great distance before nightfall, the two continue walking into the forest, passing through various biomes with many different creatures. But something always goes wrong and William never manages to catalog his findings. After walking all day, the pair finally arrive at a good camping spot and Buck decides to inspect the perimeter looking for any kind of threat, but while alone, Willie meets up with a mega cuddly creature that looks like a puppy but with 8 legs being hunted by a trio of predators. The orange creature takes shelter behind the boy, who laughs at him for being afraid of something so small. But soon the mother of the mutant animals arrives and starts to stare at William, who is totally terrified. Trying to negotiate, the youngster takes a chocolate bar and offers it to the mega predator to buy his freedom, but the hungry puppy ends up eating the treat right in front of the mutant mommy, leaving her furious. In a panic, Willie runs with the little dog on his lap until they meet Buck on the way, who throws them both up a tree and stretches his arm out in front of the predator, causing him to trip and fall face first into a wreck, safe and sound. Duck scans the little dog and tells the boy that this is great prey, but Willie refuses to eat it and says he will adopt it, naming the puppy Flash Rider his nickname in all the games. Following logic, the demented robot says that the dog is useless and starts chasing it, scaring Flash away and heading for the place where they are to spend the night. After setting up camp, Buck realizes that his battery is at 50% and decides to go into temporary hibernation mode, going completely offline for the night. As dawn breaks, the pair walk back out looking for supplies when they begin to hear a bugle-like noise. Following the sound, they find a kind of gigantic beetle that can blow air through the horn on its head, making an extremely loud noise that serves to communicate with the others. As Willie's stomach is rumbling with hunger, Buck begins to analyze the surrounding fruit and hands them to the boy, causing several different side effects. Certain that nothing will go wrong this time, the robot takes a colorful fruit and hands it to the young man, but the fruit ends up bursting in his hand, revealing that it is a mega sticky super glue while trying to get loose. The Buck starts spinning wildly and ends up crashing face first into a tree trunk, getting totally trapped by the gooey slime. To help his friend, Willie picks up a branch and tries to make a lever movement to release it, but the wood ends up breaking in half and the boy falls down the ravine, ending up in a pond that is perfect for a campsite. From afar, Flash observes everything and jumps into the ravine together with the boy falling into the same pool of water as him and finally showing him which fruit he can actually eat. Just then, Buck manages to get loose from the tree and jumps after Willie. Scaring Flash away just as he hits the water upset, the boy fights with the robot, which tries to comfort him by showing him some affection and then takes him to collect some wood. While Buck is getting the materials to build a cabin, Flash appears to Willie and calls him to photograph some creatures, forcing the boy to lie to the robot to get away. A few meters away, the human and the little alien dog find another one of those bizarre beetles at the perfect angle to catalog the species, but when Will takes the picture, the camera flash blinds the animal, which falls on its own horn. Breaking it in two and taking away its ability to make noise to help the creature, the young man slowly approaches and tries to put the lost limb back in place. However, the beetle does not take the idea very well and starts shaking, knocking the human off his back. Determined to fix his mistake, he rides on the bug's head and holds on until the creature tires, managing to tie the horn back into position. With the job done, he and Flash start running through the forest until they reach another lake that is perfect for them to jump into, but Buck finds them and starts fighting with the human. Saying that he can't go away like that while being lectured by the robot, William touches a plant that sticks out its thorns and stabs the boy's finger, contaminating him with something that begins to spread through his body, leaving him with blue skin and extremely ill. Upon seeing the boy touch the plant, Flash runs away and returns a few minutes later to spray the goo from a plant into Willie's mouth, causing the boy's skin to return to normal almost instantly, as well as normalizing his heart rate and extinguishing all other symptoms, realizing that Flash has saved the boy's life. Luck finally decides to accept him into the group, and together the trio sets off back to camp in the woods. The next morning, William wakes up to find his little dog completely petrified and is quite worried, but Buck explains that Flash is just going through a metamorphosis and will soon come out of his cocoon, which makes the boy feel much calmer. Together, the trio spends their days in the forest, cataloging every possible creature and plant, developing will skills as an explorer. Suddenly, countless clouds form in the sky and Flash desperately runs for shelter, ignoring the boys. Paul, who invites him to enter the hut they have just made. Finding it strange, Willie watches the rain and realizes that even the plants have taken shelter from the storm, leaving him extremely confused. Suddenly the storm turns into a hailstorm, and they finally understand why the forest creatures have run for cover. At first the Earthlings watch the rain as Buck protects them from the ice boulders, but soon the spheres begin to grow in size until they are larger than the very hut they have built, forcing Buck to protect them with a force field that completely sucks out his battery with less than 20% power remaining. The robot says it will need to go into hibernation mode to use the remaining charge to keep the transmitter active, meaning Buck will be completely shut down until a probe passes by the planet. Willie then decides that he will try to recover the battery that they have lost and carries the robot's casing back to the Red Sand Desert, where he intends to venture out into the open to retrieve the battery. When it's time to put the plan into action, Flash is afraid that the boy will get hurt and runs ahead of him to retrieve the object, but he ends up alerting the stone creatures that awaken and start head-butting the 8 o'clock. Like a dog several times, leaving his body full of wounds. Desperate, Flash runs towards the cave, but one of the crabs manages to land ahead, but that causes the dog to fly away and faint. Falling a few meters from the cave in fear, Willie runs outside and saves Flash from being crushed at the last second, taking him into the tunnel from where he begins to care for his friend. Giving up on the battery, the boy decides to leave Buck's carcass inside the cave and starts carrying Flash back to the forest, but halfway they end up passing through a biome with very fragile oil, causing the ground to give way under Will's feet, opening a giant hole through which he falls to return to the surface. The boy takes the survival weapon that Buck gave him and tries to use the grappling hook to climb out of there, but the ground around him is totally flat and there is no safe place for the grappling hook to attach itself. Desperate, William starts screaming for help, but the only one who can hear him is Flash, who is totally incapacitated. Accepting his fate, the boy decides to just sit and await his end when he notices something familiar on the ground dumped in the hole. Willie finds a piece of horn from one of those beetles, which gives him the idea to use the object as a shriek to call for the help of those insects with what little strength he has left. The boy blows the horn and is soon met by the giant insects, who, as a way of thanking him for his help earlier, serve as a support for him to attach the harpoon to their heads. In this way William finally manages to get out of the hole and thanks the beetles for saving his life, forming a sort of alliance with the creatures. 10 months later, the boy is able to manage quietly through the forest together with Flash, who has now gone through so many metamorphoses that he is gigantic. Together the two set a trap and begin hunting a super-fast gorilla. But since the primate is extremely agile, the duo must chase the target until they reach the hedgehogs. To do this, Willie asks Flash to run after the gorilla while he takes a shortcut with his board in the lower part of the forest. Flash manages to corner the mutant overalls against the hedgehogs, forcing the creature to run away over them, giving Will the opening he needed to take some pictures and catalog this new species during the night. The duo prepares a meal and decides to lie down to watch the stars, but when they are almost asleep, Flash sees something flashing in the sky and warns Willie, who upon checking realizes that it is a space probe. Excited, the boy says that soon someone will come to rescue them and decides to fetch Buck to go to Earth with them. But Flash begins another of his metamorphoses and William decides to go to the cave alone, where he finds his tin friend totally deactivated and full of bushes over his carcass. Apparently Buck's energy has been completely depleted during these months. And now he can't even power the transmitter to return home with his friends. Willie decides that he will go to the desert to recover the battery. However, he knows that it will not be easy and begins to prepare a real arsenal for the mission, making several different types of arrows. With everything ready, Mini Rambo uses the horn to call his beetle friend and sets off toward the Red Sands, where the crabs are all around the battery. As soon as he arrives at the place, Will sneaks in among the creatures and manages to retrieve the object without making any noise, but as soon as he picks up the battery, a piece of the destroyed module falls to the ground and makes an absurdly loud noise, waking up all the crabs at once to keep them away. Willie takes his weapon and activates the torch function, producing a strong jet of fire that can keep all the monsters away. But soon the gas runs out and he is completely defenseless, needing to run to save himself. In his haste, the boy manages to knock 2 crabs head-on and faint. However, several others are still behind him, forcing Will to use his harpoon to swing between the stone creatures as if he were a primitive version of Spider-Man. From a distance, the boy sees the beetle coming towards him and runs to jump on its back, getting a ride to escape. But one of the crabs catches up with him and lands ahead, but so strong that it sends the battery flying far away. Trapped and about to be devoured, William manages to get a steel beam into the mouth of the predator that throws him full force upwards. But just as the boy is about to fall into the stone monster's mouth, Flash arrives even bigger than before and saves his guardian again. Together with his friends, Will knows it will be easier and decides to come up with a plan, asking the 8 o'clock. Like a dog to run to the battery while he and the beetle use the camera hologram to distract the animals. Still, one of the crabs sees Flash running and decides to go after him, breaking away from the rest of the group and forcing Willie to go after him to save his friend with his modified arrows, gluing the creature's entire body with that gooey fruit. Thinking they are free, the trio finally manages to recover the battery and run towards the cave, but 3 crabs are still after them, forcing them to work as a team to trap the creature's legs with the grappling hook, getting rid of the predators once and for all. Safe and sound, the trio runs back to the tunnel where they put the battery into Buck. After all this time, the robot finally manages to emit the distress signal that is finally picked up by the probe, confirming that they will send an automatic ship to rescue him and that soon they will go home. Shaken by the news, the boy returns to the forest and begins to say goodbye to the friends he made during his stay, as well as taking several samples of everything the planet has to offer, taking several souvenirs to his parents. When the rescue ship finally arrives, Will and Buck climb aboard. They start calling for Flash, who decides to stay on his planet even though he is sad. The boy accepts the decision and gets into the ship that takes off into the skies, promising that one day he will return to visit Flash on the space station. Willie finally meets up with his parents again and begins to tell them about his adventures during this time, as well as showing them all the species he collected during his journey, making his parents finally see him as a true space explorer. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe for more movie review from Chard Review. See you next time.